Hi, welcome to Stories of Art. My name is Carel Huydecoper. Today I'm going to tell you the remarkable story of Dürer's rhinoceros. And in the course of this story I'm going to be talking about, well, a rhinoceros and other exotic animals that are often endangered. And I'm going to talk about people who treated these animals badly. This is not something I condone, of course. This is something nobody condones these days, but remember, these things happened hundreds and hundreds of years ago when things were different. So instead of chewing my ass off in the comments, you might be better off donating something to one of the very worthy charities that try to keep these animals alive. But let me get started with the story. That for me started years and years ago when I worked on an exhibition in a museum, and it was an exhibition of musical clocks, as one does. And we had this clock on loan from the Hermitage in St. Petersburg. And it's this lovely clock. It's this one made by a man called James Cox. He was British, he was a jeweler and clockmaker. And he made these very, very elaborate designs that, in this case, it's the clock itself is quite small. It's about the size of a pocket watch. And below that, there is this elaborate sort of architecture of gold and amethyst, and just below the clock there's a compartment that opens, and in this picture they've taken everything out because there's this sort of drawer that comes out, and it contains let's say a sort of a vanity set, tweezers and little bottles for perfume and, well, makeup accessories, that sort of thing. A princessly vanity kit. Below that is another compartment, and that compartment contains a bell playing mechanism, so it can play music. And then the whole thing is carried by four identical little animals, rhinos. And these rhinos, if you look closer at them, you can see that they look sort of like rhinos. You know that they intended a rhino, but it's sort of off. It doesn't really look like a real one. Now, that stuck to mind in my little brain, and sometime later I encountered the very same rhinoceros somewhere very, very different. In this case I was in Pisa. In Pisa, the great cathedral of Pisa, you know, the one with the leaning tower, when you stand in front of the cathedral, there's three large doors, and the one on your left hand has a bronze panel, and on it you see this rhino. And this rhino is very much the same rhino as I saw on a clock in St. Petersburg. The things that are wrong with it are precisely the same. You see, they each have this one horn at the point of their nose, at the tip of their nose, as it is supposed to have, and then this weird little horn sticking out of their back, and this look as though it was made out of armor plating, and the armor was sort of riveted on it, as if it was wearing metal armor. And I've seen more of these around, and looking around on the internet I found this picture as well, of this very same type of rhino. I'm not sure if you can see it. It's a pretty dark picture, but can you see there's a rhino here in front, and it's trying to skewer an elephant with its horn. I even came across this textbook in this case it was published in Belgium in 1621, a biology textbook that has this very same rhino in it. And I've been told, but I've never actually seen, that this very same rhino was used in textbooks of biology up until the 20th century. And that makes you wonder where it came from. What does this very strange picture of a rhinoceros, it must have some sort of origin. And it does. The man who drew this rhino is called Albrecht Dürer. And Albrecht Dürer made this woodcut in 1515. And it became very, very famous. It is the first of these images, and so very clearly the source of all of these later rhinos. Now, Albrecht Dürer was one of the superstars of art of his age. He was more or less the exact contemporary of Michelangelo, and he lived mostly in Nuremberg in Germany, traveled all over Europe, went to Rome, knew lots and lots of different people that he corresponded with, so he knew all the new stuff that happened all over Europe. He was famous for his accuracy, and in this self-portrait, it's not just a self-portrait, it has a little line at the side, and that says not only that this is a self-portrait, but at what age he made it. So you can sort of see, if you would meet the real man, you would see there's a difference in age. And on every one of his self-portraits it says his age. Almost as a documentarist, he's that accurate. That doesn't mean that he never made anything up. He made things up all the time. But what he also did is he traveled to all kinds of different places in Europe where he could find things that you couldn't see anywhere else. For instance, he once went to Antwerp when there was a menagerie there. So a sort of a temporary zoo owned by a prince. And there he went specifically to draw these monkeys. And he kept a diary, and we still have quite a bit of his diary. We know very much why he went there. He went there to draw monkeys from life because he hadn't seen any recently. So he wanted to really have drawings of new, fresh monkeys in his mind so he could use them in different paintings at some other point. And to describe that, he used a specific word. He said he was conterfeiting it. He made a conterfeit, which is a German-Dutch word, and it's the origin, it's the same sort of word as counterfeit. He made something look exactly as it looked in real life. Now, drawings like these were a great source for other artists. Many artists would copy drawings of people who were good at making these counterfeits, because then you had a reliable picture of a monkey that you could use in your paintings. And people didn't have access to pictures of monkeys or giraffes or whatever. So in 1515, Dürer made this drawing, first a drawing, this is the original drawing he made of it, of a rhino. And there's a bit of text underneath that actually explains in German the occasion for which he made this drawing. He made it, he said, because King Manuel of Portugal had received this rhino. It had been a gift from India. And Dürer said he made a counterfeit of it, a conterfeit. So he claimed he actually saw it. And this is what a rhino looks like. The trouble is, he didn't see it. We know that King Manuel actually had a rhino for a while. He got it as a gift. And he was really, really excited about it for, well, many reasons. It's an exciting animal to see. But also because of a story they all knew. Everyone at the time would know that was in any way interested in a rhino. And that is a story written by a Roman writer called Pliny. Pliny the Elder, who actually died in the explosion of Vesuvius in the year 79, had written a number of books on animals, on nature in general, and in it there's a lot of facts that are fascinating to us and useful, and observations about nature, but he also included a lot of nonsense. I don't know why, maybe because it sold more books, but there's a lot of nonsense in it. And one of the stories that Pliny wrote is that a rhino has a deadly enemy. They are the most deadly enemies of elephants. When a rhino and an elephant meet, the rhino will charge at the elephant, and it has its horn for one purpose and one purpose only, and that is to rip open the bellies of elephants. Which, of course, isn't true. But that's what Pliny wrote. And that's one of the main sources of information that still Manuel had, and Dürer had, and many other people in the world relied on that information. So when Manuel got his hands on a rhino, he was very, very excited, because he also had a young elephant. They actually went so far as to build a small arena. They put up these rafters and people could sit around, and they had an audience, and they put the rhino there and then led in their very young elephant. They had a sort of a baby elephant. Now everybody was so excited that when the baby elephant came in, the rhino turned towards it, probably just being curious, and everybody started cheering, and the little elephant got scared and ran away. So they never got to see them fighting, but it did confirm that an elephant was apparently, to them, afraid of a rhino. So lots of other people became excited about this whole thing. One of the people that got really excited was the Pope, Leo X. Leo X already had an elephant, also that had been a gift from Manuel as well. It was called Hanno, and he held it in the Vatican, apparently. It was called a white elephant, and he also expressed his interest in this rhino to see if he could actually fight Hanno. And Manuel decided to give his rhino to the Pope. So this poor old rhino was brought on a ship, shackled to the deck, and then transported to Rome. But it never got there. The ship sank and the rhino died. And in between all this excitement about these rhinos, a number of things had happened. Artists we don't know, had started making drawings of rhinos, of this very one rhino. And there were poems written about it, and this is a woodcut that accompanied a poem that was published all over Europe. Now Dürer got wind of all of this, and from these various rhinoceros looked like. Now he had a number of problems because of a number of copies of other pictures that people had made of this rhinoceros. But more than that, they differed from the description that Pliny gave him. Because Pliny, that Roman writer, had written about a rhino having two horns, one behind the other. And all the pictures he received were of a rhino with only one horn. And all the recent information that had been written told him about the armor plating around this animal. From these different sources, he started to compile his own rhino. And you can see he took these bits. He took the pictures he probably saw of the head of this rhino and gave it one horn. But then he needed to add one more because Pliny told him there was another one. And so he put it on the back, just behind the head, at the end of the neck, where it would be suitable to rip open bellies of elephants, I suppose, if the rhino was to run underneath it. Now, where does this discrepancy of one or two horns come from? Well, Pliny obviously described an African rhino. African rhinos have two horns, one behind the other. And the rhino that Manuel had gotten was an Indian one, and they only have one horn. So they're talking about two different types of animals. And in his combination of only knowing about these armor platings, he made them into this sort of riveted sort of weird looking armored animal. But the text that is on this woodcut, the same one that's below his drawing, you can see, by the way, that it's its mirror image. That happens when you make a woodcut from a drawing. It's often mirrored. But they added this text that Dürer had added, and he said he had really seen it, and this was a counterfeit of a rhino. And his reputation was such that that's what people believed. So for centuries people believed that this is what a rhino looks like. And that's why you have it on so many different places. This very same, very distinctively wrong rhino. Now, could they have known better? Well, by the time that James Cox came around, he could have. Because by that time, there had been a different rhino that actually toured all of Europe. She was called Clara. And there was this one a Dutch entrepreneur who had imported one from India. And a very young rhino, and the poor animal was loaded on a cart, apparently a big cart because it grew into a full-grown rhino in time, and they toured all over Europe and people made pictures of her. And there's a whole range of paintings, of engravings and other things that were used all over Europe and made a new image of a rhino. Except that some people still believed in the version of Dürer. And so it endured. So we kept having the wrong rhino next to images of what an Indian rhino actually looks like. And the strange thing is that at the time that Dürer made his rhino, one of his friends and colleagues made one as well from the same source material. And that source material must have been pretty good, because this is a woodcut made by Hans Burgmeier. And Hans Burgmeier was also a painter, illustrator, and a graphic artist, but of a much more modest career than Dürer. He was not a superstar. People usually haven't heard of him. But Hans Burgmeier had the same source material. He was a good friend of Dürer, so he would have had access to it. And he came up with this woodcut, of which sadly there's only one print left, which is in the Albertina in Vienna. And strangely enough, this one is pretty accurate. This is much closer to the truth than the one Dürer made. But I guess that's what reputation does. Dürer claimed he had seen the real thing, and he sort of staked his reputation on it. He said, this is what it looks like, and I am the authority, so listen to this one. And people did. And for centuries they were wrong, even though there was a good source next to it that was a great deal better. Anyway, let us hope that we can keep some of these animals alive, because it would be a shame if our children or grandchildren would only be able to see a rhino from weird pictures that were made by people like Dürer. In any case, thank you for listening, and if you haven't already, this is a good time to hit the subscribe button, because I make a lot of videos like this. And if you like them, please give me a like, and I'll see you in another one. Bye.